Three ingredients for successful product managers are vision, people, and execution. If you're early in your career, I saw some people on the Slack saying that they are on the messaging saying that they are indeed in the beginning of their career. If you're early in your career, you can probably get your first promotion or two just by doing execution right. However, you will get to a point in your career where you'll hit some ceiling if you just do that. So at this point, you will need to, your ability to drive vision, get people bought into the vision will become more and more important. So it's important to practice those skills early on. On the flip side, if you don't show execution skills, you will not even be able to keep your first job. So the rest will not matter. So really, you need all three. Today, I'll talk a bit about, based on my observations of product managers, how they go about those three items, and based on my learnings and observations, how I manage my time to be able to cater to everything. But before we jump into that, I would love to do a quick round of introductions, but since it's a webinar, I'll just have to introduce myself. I started my career as an engineer in Israel, worked at Intel, and then in a small startup where I learned that being an engineer is not enough for a startup to succeed. There was many other factors that played in. So I left the startup, did my MBA, and then became a product manager at Google. So Google is where I really learned to be kind of the basics of product management. I worked within the ad space on their homegrown CRM, and later on Google Offers, which was our attempt at Groupon back when it was a thing. Then I moved to Yahoo, which later was acquired by Verizon and became Auth and Verizon Media. At Yahoo, I can proudly say that I touched all our ad products. I learned how to lead teams, product teams, how to lead people. And I now lead all the publisher-facing products, which means in English that my job is to help publishers make living so we can all continue to consume content. Preparing for this talk, I reflected a bit on what I did in my career. I think I launched 8 products. I think I killed 6, including my first 2, which was pretty horrifying. I grew many products. I met some great PMs, some good PMs, and some not so good PMs. I touched careers of many people, and I want to think that I did more good than bad. So my observations for today are based on that, those reflections. Talking about execution, vision, and people, it all comes down to bringing the world from point A to point B. So the world is currently at a given state, may vary based on your domain, and you believe that it should be in a different place. So it can be, all cars are self-driving, all the internet is secure, publishers can make living, so we can all continue to consume content, whatever your domain is. It all comes down to moving the world from point A to point B. In order to get from point A to point B, you need to know where point B is, and that's why vision is so important. So if you just started a new job, you were handed a new product, a new project, sure, you will get pulled into all the conversations on roadmap and what's the backlog look like and what's the teams and what are the requirements and all that stuff. It is important that you spend the time asking yourself why. Why are we doing this product? What would happen if all the customers you can imagine are using the product to the fullest extent and also use all the other related products they should be using? How will the world be different? Your current product that you're working on is a starting point. There is an end state that is a lot bigger than that. It's important that you spend time thinking through it, talking with people about it, crystallizing your thoughts about it. If you don't do that, you'll end up where I ended my first 2 products, where I launched them, drove adoption, and then had to shut them down because nothing really happened. So spend the time, think why you're building your product, and then practice telling that story to everybody. When you, on days where you can drive from work or to work, it can be a good practice to just pitch the product while in the car. Give the 30-second spiel, the 2-minute spiel, the 15-minute spiel. Practice explaining certain elements of your vision. Why do they matter? why is the world not where it should be, and what would awesome look like. Use it, you can do it while doing exercise. So really take the extra time when you're not in front of a computer and practice it. And if the story doesn't make sense, it's either that you don't tell it well enough or you have the wrong B and you need to rethink what B is. The last piece around vision is to constantly remind your team of B. Now, this does not mean that you need to start every meeting with a manifesto, or that you should have your vision written on your walls. It can be as simple as reminding the team whenever you face a decision or need to think through a problem, why are you solving it? Like, hey, as a reminder, we believe that the world should look like B. Today, we're trying to solve an element of getting there. It also means reminding the team when you get validation or invalidation of B. So recent example, 2 weeks ago, I started a thread with my team about a certain element of our vision that we were trying to think through. And within 3 days after kicking off the discussion, I ran into our CEO plus 2 other senior VPs in 3 different contexts. Each of them brought up different versions of the same vision and challenge we're seeing. So just dropping out to the team saying, hey, I just got 3 pieces of validations from 3 different people and here they are. So just a reminder that gets the team going, and it can help later as the team progresses in thinking through problems. Moving from vision to people, I'll use something that I believe Elon Musk came up with. I did not hear it from him directly, but my research showed that it's his idea. That he talked about the idea that people are like vectors. They have a direction and a magnitude. And how far you'll get is the sum of all those vectors or arrows and the directions at which they are pointing. So I'll translate it into what it means for us as product managers. So you know where point B is. You can try to get there on your own. So you're pointing at point B, but ultimately there is only so much you can do if you need to define your product, write the requirements, code the product, sell it, market it, and then support it. So you're going to have a couple of team members, or a few team members working with you. Some are more capable than others. You can see it by the size of their arrow. They point generally the same direction at you, though it may not be identical, either because their beliefs are a bit different than yours, or because they just grasp a bit differently than you. But you're close enough that you can work together, and most of the time it will work well. You may also run into people who are very capable, very passionate, but are pointing in a different direction. Many times when you run into executives, you can, especially if you're working in a bigger company, you may run into that. You run into some VP of some other product who is really passionate about it and really, have a very compelling pitch, and it just has nothing to do with what you're doing. And it's fine, but it's just a different direction. Where you'll end up getting is basically the sum of all those arrows. What happens if you put those arrows on top of each other? Some sort of an average that is maybe a bit closer to B, but not quite there. Your job as a product manager is basically to align all those vectors or arrows as well as possible to lead to B, subject to 2 constraints. One is that you yourself are also a vector here, an arrow. Your time, energy, capacity to influence others is limited. So you need to be strategic on where you deploy your own force here. And the second is that changing people's direction, the more you change them, the more you steer them from their own passion, the smaller their arrows will become. You may have experienced it yourself if a manager ever forced you to do something you don't want to do. You're working on his vision, not yours, but as a result, you're less passionate, you're spending less time, you're not as empowered because you need to check with him if you're doing what he wants. So again, it takes a lot of effort to change somebody too far from what his true passion is. And the result is that his impact shrinks, which sometimes is not good. So the tips, keeping those constraints in mind, the 3 tips I would give about kind of managing the vectors. The first is pick the right ones. You may run into people who are very passionate, very skilled, but are just passionate about something else. I tend to run into it on my personal, on my career. Whenever my boss sends me to talk with some other team who is working on some cool things, and they may need to show ads in their products, and many times I would listen, learn, but then the conclusion will be, hey, what you're working on is really cool, but it will be distraction for both of us if we try to put ads on your product when it's just starting. At the moment, you should focus on getting more users, getting more engagement. I'm sure if you have 1 billion users, I'll find a way to make money out of it. So I have some ideas, but let's not sweat on them right now. So respect their passion, let them go with it. The second is, again, being strategic about changing the direction of those arrows. So back to reminding people of B. Being able to say, like, whenever I see let's say my engineering team is debating 2 options of how to solve a problem, and one of them seems a bit off, I may tell them, like, hey, remember, ultimately we're about B. What, option 1 that you raised doesn't seem exactly the right one for it, but I understand you have many concerns that you're trying to cater to. Think about it, and I'll respect your decision. So not everything has to turn into a massive argument and debate about whose way is the right way. I can remind them, and I know that they understand what B is, and I can trust them on that and not spend a lot of time. Although, again, over time, as the reminders come again and again, the team will get better and better at making the right decisions. The third part, and it's actually just kind of mathematical view of it, if you will, is sometimes it's not about changing the direction of the arrow, but rather the size. So you may run into a team that doesn't do exactly what you have in mind, but they're close enough, and maybe just empowering them to do more of it can get you very close to B, and you can punt on the debates for later. Examples, recent example, we had another team that we work with, the Yao Mail team, had some really clever ideas that you can debate if there are ads or not, or just good user experience. Rather than debating if it's an ad and how to serve, to use our ad system to do what they want to do, I introduced them to people who can help them get to where they need to get, and we decided that we will figure it out later. I helped them get the world closer to B. I created goodwill that ensure that later we will be able to figure out the slight differences in our views, but really growing their direction matters. And I know, especially early in the career, your career, it may be a bit harder because there is always this fear of, if they do it, then I will lose control. I wouldn't worry about it that much if I were you. Just empower other teams, create the goodwills, the right goodwill. Ultimately, it comes down to getting the world closer to B. A quick word about yourself. Sometimes I hear those PMs who come and say, like, I did this and I did that, and we pushed the world this, and look at all the impact. I find it to be a turnoff personally. It's not about what you did. I think your team will also find it to be a turnoff if you keep talking about what you did. It is about B, and about how they help collectively as a team the world get from A to B. If anything is about you, it's actually, we should talk about your limitation. Like, hey, B is really cool, but I cannot get to B with my own skills. I think your skills in whichever domain is really valuable. I would love to get your help in getting to B. So not about you. I will not spend much time talking about execution. There's probably many books that would do it a lot better than I could. The key thing to keep in mind is be on top of your stuff. So all the work that you did in getting the teams together would matter, and that their effort would count. Bringing those 3 items together, and that's maybe a kind of a midpoint for this presentation. My view of vision, people, and execution is that they all come down to this notion that people have an option. Your engineer can choose if he spends the extra hour working on your stuff or on something else. Your engineering manager can choose whether the extra person he hired will go to work on your product or somebody else's product. Your salesperson can sell your product or something else, and your customers can choose to buy your product or somebody else's product. And for them to choose to work with you, they need to believe in your vision. They need to believe that you will treat them right, and working with you will be a good use of their time, passion, skill, and energy, and that your execution can bring whatever you're trying to do to completion. Before moving to the second phase of this talk about time management, I want to see if, Oren, if there are any maybe kind of top 1 or 2 questions that we can take, also kind of giving everybody some time to digest what we covered so far.
Yeah, so we do have one question from Gabby. How important do you think it is to get an MBA to be a great product manager?
Good question. Some of the better product leaders I've seen did not have an MBA. For me, it ended up being a step in my career change, and I learned a lot. I know fantastic PMs who did not do an MBA. I think it comes a lot more, the ability to think about problems broadly and pull yourself, if you came from an engineering background, pull yourself out of the technical side and more into the how the world could be and what else needs to be in place to make the impact matters. Beyond that, MBA, again, great experience, get great learning opportunity, not critical.
Thanks. And folks, if you have any additional questions throughout the chat to talk, please put them in the Q&A section.
Cool. Having covered those 3 elements, I do want to talk a bit about how I spend my time now that or used to spend my time when I was doing product. Now I'm also busy managing bigger teams. And for that, I would like you to think through an exercise. It's a bit of a hypothetical one, but for me, it was really cool when I did it for myself. So if you think of where your product is now versus where it was a year ago, and think of all the hard work you put into it, gathering requirements, sitting with engineers, sitting with customers, status update meetings and emails, name it, all this work. Now take all this work and all those activities and try to think of the impact in hindsight of those activities, how much they contributed to where the product is right now. And then sort those activities by impact. Now it's a bit, again, it's theoretical because many times activities are interlinked and you don't know ahead of time. But still, if you reflect back, there are a few things that really mattered and many things that didn't. So probably the curve would look something like that. On the left, some high impact activities you did that actually contributed to most of your collective impact. And then a long tail, some torso of activities that may have mattered, and long tails of activities that even when you were doing them, you knew that they wouldn't matter. When I'm reflecting back and trying to categorize what falls into each category, and where I'm trying to spend my time, I can categorize it into 4 buckets. The first bucket is the area that you need to overinvest in. Shouldn't surprise you by now, but vision, people, and execution of key tracks falls into that category. Good news is that if you do that right, you'll be more effective than most of your peers, and you will only be working 3 hours a day, which is fantastic, by the way, when you work from home and nobody can see. So really overinvest in those areas. There is the excuse of I don't have time to think about vision because I'm busy responding to emails is a very lame excuse. Take the time, think about those items, make sure that they happen. Vision for sure, a tip about people or a kind of a thinking point about people. When you think of your personal return on time spent, it's very hard to beat an hour you spend with a team member making him better. really, like I cannot think of an activity, like either getting a team member into the team or making them better is a really, really well spent time from an impact to time perspective. When I was working as an individual PMs, with let's say 15 engineers, whenever I had a new engineer join the team, I would spend an hour just taking the engineers through the vision, lay of the land, what are we doing, what are the key initiatives, etc. Very well time spent. Take the time to do it. It also, again, creates a lot of good vibe in the team when you do that. And again, key tracks, you do not have to define everything to the last bit, but you also don't want to be in a place where the team is stuck on key decisions because they need you. So unblock them. It's important. Now, again, once you do that, you only work 3 hours a day, and already more productive than most. The second bucket is what I call hypothesize. So sure, you can go down the list of lower and lower impact activities, but maybe it's more important to spend time identifying which other activities should move to the first bucket. So I used to spend a lot of time talking with customers, talking with our sales teams about customers, looking at our own data, looking at other products in and out of the company, looking at competitors, trying to understand and hypothesize what is it that would resonate with our customers, what trends we're not aware of that are happening and that we need to think of. It's a bit of a weird time spent because you don't really produce anything when you do it. Many times it ended up with, yes, I learned, or I looked at something, some idea, and nothing came out of it. However, when it does work, it does make a big impact, a lot bigger than you picking some other random action item. And even when it doesn't work, it makes you a lot wiser. So there are ideas that I looked at 3 years ago and they didn't make sense at the time, but then later somebody else threw another idea in, or some technology came, or there were some other changes in the market that suddenly made an old idea viable again. So the fact that I spent the time 3 years ago evaluating an idea puts me in a position to respond now and say, hey, no, this clicks, I get it. Let me pick something else from the past, and now I think I have a better idea. So really important to spend the time on that aspect. It makes you wiser. It will be rewarding over time, if not immediately. A third bucket is about scaling yourself. So setting the team to be in a place where they don't need to rely on you on every decision. So thinking of the process on which they make decisions, how do you get to having the team mostly make the right decisions without having to have you make the decisions. Thinking of the structures of who needs to get what from who in order to make those decisions. See which meetings you can eliminate. Again, your engineers would appreciate it. You would probably appreciate it too. The last bucket is what I would call jury duty. You can guess what falls in that bucket. We're all ultimately corporate citizens, whether we work in a big company or a small company. Some of what we do, we need to do because somebody asked for it. Our boss, a peer, just like we have our point B, somebody else has his own point B. And it's fine if we spend some of our time helping somebody else. We shouldn't be jerks. However, you need to make sure that this part is contained. If all you're doing is helping somebody else to get to his vision and you don't drive your own vision, you will fail as a product manager. So do it, but box it. Back to kind of summarizing it all, people, vision, and execution are the area that you should absolutely focus on. Sometimes exploring and hypothesizing about what else you may want to do, scaling the way you operate with a team, and again, being a nice corporate citizen. To summarize the talk, I would like to talk about my own personal values and why this topic is so important to me. So a couple of years ago, 3 years ago by now, I did a presentation workshop with Duarte. It's an institute, I think they sit in the peninsula. Very good workshop. I really enjoyed it. And part of it, they had us work through what our own values are. Not a thorough exercise by any means. They just gave us, I think it was 50 post-it notes with different values like family and wealth and health. And we had 2 minutes to pick 3 that resonate the most with us. So I had to quickly look at all of them, and these 3 came in mind. And it was a bit weird for me when I first saw them, because the whole premise was, think of what your friends would tell about you in your obituary. And when trust, friendship, and competence came up, trust and friendship was fine. I could relate. Competence was a bit snobbish, feels like, Guy was, can you imagine on my grave, my friends are saying, oh, Guy was such a great friend. He was so trustworthy, very competent. Like, that's a bit snobbish. However, when I thought about it, reflected a bit about it in the context of my work life, those 3 things clicked, because in building a product together, you have a group of people who are designers, engineers, salespeople, maybe other functions, who are coming together for a few years to spend time trying to make something happen, and odds are against them. As the product manager, they put their trust in you and in your competence to make good use of all those years and all the skills and all their passions. And for me, this is a very, very worthy cause. So thank you for listening.
Awesome, Guy. This is second time I've seen this this presentation of yours, and it's still inspiring. Guy, we have a few questions and some time for them. So let's start with Jack is asking, how do you persuade strong senior team member or stakeholder, strong vector, to work on your outcome, especially if she is against the outcome initially?
So I can traverse, good question. It happens all the time. And I'll traverse a bit through the deck, because some of the tips are weaved in. One, practice your vision and the storytelling. There's a chance that you are wrong. So you need to think carefully and really ask yourself why you care for it. Many times when you run into disagreement, it's actually about the how, not about the what. So really, if you bubble it out from outside of your execution into where do we want the world to be, and you ask why several times, many times people are actually aligned. So, I'm in the advertising business. Many times people would agree that more revenue is better. People would also agree that a better consumer experience is better. So if I ask why enough times, there is an agreement, but then we may disagree on the path or on relative priority. So part of it is the storytelling and the vision. I think maybe actually these are the key areas. The other one is maybe coming back to vectors, be aware of where you do and do not need to get the person to align with you. Maybe sometimes, depending on where this person sits compared to where you are in the organization, you don't necessarily need to agree now. You can say, okay, if I can keep running without this person slowing me down, I'll have better proof points in a year, and then let's re-engage. Not always the case, but these are the tips that come in mind.
Great. Another question was, is there a technique that you would recommend to guide your stakeholders to avoid analysis paralysis?
That's a whole other talk, and a very good question. A few things that come in mind. One is think through the order of influence. So especially if you're talking about executive teams or teams in which you expect that there is some cross influence, think a bit, spend some time thinking of who is influencing who and how to get people to buy in the right order. So if you're showing up in a room and pitching something for the first time, odds are against you. If by the time you present, everybody other than the chief person is already nodding and pitching on your behalf, you're better off. The more they talk, the better off you are. I think this would be the kind of the first main tip I would give. Again, there's a long list of other tips that come in mind, but this is where I would start.
Okay, good, thanks. David is asking, how do you increase your competence level as a PM?
Oh, practice, practice, practice. It's like the same way you get to Carnegie Mellon, to Carnegie Hall. I think it comes down to practicing. I learned my basics of product management at Google, where at least at the time, 10 years ago, it was less about a formal training and more about do it, practice a vision, come tell the story, get hammered, come tell the story again. I think it comes down to that, just practice.
Okay, and is that the same way you get to Carnegie Mellon?
To Carnegie Hall.
No.
Yes.
Oh, Carnegie Hall.
It's a known joke, no? Like, how do you, this tourist meet this guy and ask him, like, in New York, and ask him, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? Like, practice, practice, practice.
Yeah. There was a question on the chat regarding how important are technical skills for a PM, and at the same time, how important are UX or design sense skills for a PM?
Good question. I tend to take pride of being well-rounded, which in my view means that I'm mediocre in everything. I think there are certain fields in which you need to be super technical. Like if you're manufacturing chips, hardware, like you cannot be hand-wavy on how silicon works. But in other places that have, consumer application, products that are being used by day-to-day people, I think your level of technicality needs to be good enough to have a conversation with engineers. I'm finding that my ability to push them and talk a bit technical gives me some respect, but beyond that really doesn't matter. And I take pride of the fact that I will be useless as an engineer by now. So I don't think it's critical there. Same goes for UX. As long as you have somebody who can complement your skills and you can acknowledge your skills. So I think an important part is to acknowledge your limitations. If you can tell your team, hey, I'm not super technical, I need my engineers to help define the APIs, they'll do it for you. If you try to pretend to be good at something you're not good at, that's where frictions happen. So if you have somebody else who can do UX better, and you can lean on them and you can acknowledge, hey, it's not my strength, I can give you some thoughts, it's fine. I think you can be an awesome PM. And obviously there are domains in which you don't need to be, like your product doesn't require UX. So there for sure, it's not a problem.
Awesome. We have a question about, can we have your advice and perspectives as a PM? What's the best way to deal with input from senior execs on projects we must do, e.g. pet projects?
Oh, I love this question. I do it for a living. It's something that actually we're working on as a team, like for my entire organization, we're actually working on it right now. Execs have opinions, so do I. I'm trying to train my team not to just reactively respond when it happens. What it comes down to is, you have a list of the things you're working on. If somebody asks for something new, especially if it's senior exec that you feel like you need to respect, it comes back to say like, hey, sure, we can do that, but here are the things that we need to drop. Is this the right trade-off? So if you can present your own leadership with the trade-off and say, hey, is this more important than what we're currently doing? You leave it back to them. And if they can't drop anything and want something else done, they'll need to give you more people, which is, again, on them. So that's my general advice there, something that I can tell you we are also within my team are working on.
Thank you. How do you keep your energy level with a large complex company versus a fast moving startup?
Good question. I'm only doing one of them at a time. So it's hard for me to say, kind of compare on the path I didn't take. But ultimately, I think in both cases, there are those cool projects that energize you. So some of the work you're doing because, it's daunting. Either it's a corporate daunting or you're in a startup and you have to be scrappy and you don't really get to work on your vision because you need to win the next deal. So you get a daunting part in everything. And I think it's important to also have those things that excite you. So there were times in which I was running big teams, but still had, worked on the side with 2 engineers on some cool projects. Even now, I have my weekly meeting with my computer science scientists where we are looking at algorithms, and I don't know, that's my hobby. And I appreciate the work with them. I think it's important. I just enjoy it. So I do it to keep myself energized.
Good. Let's see, Wendy's asking, are there any tactics to demonstrate vision and gain a seat at the table with leaders, even as an individual contributor PM?
I find leadership and individual contributors to be a bit orthogonal to each other. I know very senior people who are individual contributors. Ultimately, it comes, your ability to tell a story has nothing to do with how many people you manage. So practice that, again, find B, think through how you tell that story, practice it around you. And what happens, you don't have to, again, present in a big forum. If more people hear what you say, give the feedback, get bought into it, like it, you'll find that you get elevated. They send you other people, they tell other people about it, and suddenly you get pinged by more people who want to hear what you have to say. And you end up gaining seats not by the virtue of you pushing yourself to the room, but being invited to the room because you have something to tell.
Slightly related maybe is, could you share your advice on how you went about finding executive sponsorship for advancing your product career? I'm finding this is especially crucial when moving from a senior PM to a director PM role.
It's odd because it's a good question and it's odd, and I think some people are doing it deliberately and doing it well. I definitely benefit from sponsored over the years, but I want to think that I just did it by doing the right thing. So I, again, identifying the right problems, trying to solve the right problems, less about schmoozing, networking. One advice maybe on that point, especially if you have kind of trying to get buy-in from your direct manager or one above, there is this temptation to come in with a deck where you present a full vision. Sometimes the answer is actually to do it in phases, especially when it's internal and you have enough opportunity to interact. Stopping by your boss and saying, hey, I identified the problem. I can spend more time thinking about it, but do you agree with me that this is a problem? And then, follow up is like, hey, I saw another evidence that we have a problem here. Do you agree? And by the time you get to present a solution, everybody's asking you to present it. So you kind of drum up the need for your own vision. But then obviously you need to have a compelling vision and deliver on it. And you do it enough times, or you cut your losses when you don't do it well fast enough, and you create the good karma that propels you.
Good advice. Regarding the vectors, how do you align a group of executive stakeholders who all have different visions?
Oh, I call it a Monday. Actually, no kidding, I did it on this Monday. A couple of things. So advice, and it's funny because I'm just working with my team on the learnings from that experience. I would start, so the key elements that I would think through there. One is don't try to tell the story yourself. So if you can have some of them or the delegates tell the story with you, it helps because then they cannot throw you under the bus if they are presenting. So the way we approached the latest case I can think of is build a template deck that says, well, this is how we see the world in different forums. This is what sales want, this is what partnerships want, this is what the product team wants. Let them populate the story and deliver the story, and move from debating what's right to framing. Like, okay, so we are hearing that there are 3 different views, all of them are valid to have their own merits. When we try to prioritize against it, we ended up in this place that makes, we ran out of resources. and presenting to the same executive group saying, now we need your guidance. So again, you cannot solve if the executives can't agree with each other, but at the very least, you can show them that you're trying to accommodate a story and a narrative as much as possible. And that at some point it does come down to, hey, tactically, I need you to decide A versus B.
Makes sense. I want to make sure we stay on time. I think we can take one more question. So let's do Joseph's question. What's your suggestions on moving from an execution mode PM to get into more of a vision and strategy?
So I don't think it's two different jobs. Ultimately, you'll need to do both. It's very likely that early in your career, you will be asked to do more of the execution. I think part of it is time to can spend the 5-10% of time thinking why, thinking what's ahead, even if it's not presenting it in bigger forums, but just probing, kind of asking your inner circle, your boss, your peers, your engineers, kind of showing a bit of those skills. And then as you do more of that and show competence there, again, it's a practice, more of it will stick to you. What you should probably avoid is being the visionary PM who cannot execute, because you will never get to the other side. So early on, yes, there is a grind of execution. Showing that you have it and kind of asking the questions, presenting a glimpse of vision is what gets things to stick to you as you grow.
Awesome. Guy, thank you very much for sharing your guidance, your experience with us. This was great. I'd like to encourage the folks on the call to fill out the quick survey that you'll get to measure our NPS. It helps us understand how we can get better, and you can also get a free ticket to one of our live events when we open up live events again. Our next event is on June 3rd with former NetApp product lead Mohit Bhatnagar. Other than that, thank you for joining Product Discount, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.